So, hello everyone, and welcome to our first lesson, which is gonna be helpful for you. So, guys, let's get into it. My name is Asilbek Kurbanov, and today we're gonna cover a lot of things. So, let's start. More complex arguments. In the key I in the key to Ielts success, I discussed some common misunderstandings about the CEFR levels A1 to C2. You can learn more about this in the vocabulary chapter of the book. But here I will simply restate that reaching level C1 or C2 bands 7 to 9 doesn't mean using mostly C1, C2 vocabulary and grammatical structures. Candidates at C1 and the C2 have mastered the language from A1 upwards, and they know when and how to use it appropriately and effectively. As this lesson will again show, it is the argument you make that creates complexity, not the language you use. Key idea. Candidates at C1 and C2 bands 7 to 9 have mastered the language A1 to C2. They use high level language accurately and at appropriate time. We will show C1 and C2 skills by clearly explaining a complex argument, not using as much as high level grammar or vocabulary as possible. So, mhm, 4.1 arguing by showing contrast. We can prove strong reasoning or given extra for an idea by making point about a contrasting idea or argument. This can be useful way to find an extra ideas when you are stuck. To get ideas like this, ask yourself what would happen if we didn't have or do this, or what happens when we don't have do this. For example, what happens if the government doesn't help poor people? Mhm. The words and phrases you might find in this type of argument are if blah blah does not blah 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 then or without blah blah blah. Great. Look at the following example. Mhm. In many big cities, the population exceeded the argument exceeds the number of flats and houses available, which means that many people do not have anywhere to live. Let's read it again. I missed the point at first. In many big cities, the population exceeds the number of flats and houses available, which means that many people do not have anywhere to live. This causes several problems. Firstly, it can put pressure on local charities who have to find food or and shelter for the homeless. If the government doesn't help step in to help people who are struggling financially, then this puts even more stress on community programs and causes homelessness to rise even further. Points to notice. Hmm. The tenses used here, the simple present and the conditional, indicate that the writer has some experience or knowledge about this topic and feels very confident that these effects will happen. Remember, if you are less certain, you can show this by using modal verbs can, may, etc. like this. If government doesn't step in to help people who are struggling financially, then this can put even more stress on community programs and cause homelessness to rise even further. The same language is useful in presenting an argument which will which we will covered in lesson 7. Okay, combining different types of argument. At the moment, our paragraph is quite short. However, if we want to add another negative effect resulting from a lack of housing, we need to be very careful. A common mistake at band 6 is to simply add a new idea like the financial sentence here. In many big cities, the population exceeds the number of flats and houses available, which means that many people do not have anywhere to live. This causes several problems. Firstly, it can put pressure on local charities who have to find food and shelter for the homeless. If the government doesn't help step in to help people who are struggling financially, then this puts even more stress on community programs and causes homelessness to rise even further. In addition, it means that houses prices and rents remain very high. This creates a referencing problem, and the pronoun it confuses the reader, and the conclusion it becomes unclear. A pronoun refers back to the last noun mentioned, which in this case homelessness. So in many big cities, homelessness like refers the it. In addition, homelessness means the house prices and rents remain very high. This means is unclear uh, point, and the reader understands this to mean homelessness make house price very high, an idea that would need to be clarified and explained further. The writer actually intend to make the point that when the population exceeds the number of houses and flats available, this makes house prices high. To show that we are referring to back to this much earlier idea in the first sentence, we need to use synonym or paraphrase it like this. In addition, a lack of accommodation, stuff like that. This paraphrase clearly signals which two ideas are being linked by the connecting phrases in addition. In many big cities, blah blah blah. In many big cities, the population exceeds the further flats and houses available. In addition, lack of accommodation. Yeah. The population exceeds the number of flats and houses available. In addition, the lack of accommodation means that house prices rents remain very high. Which of the following points would follow one logically from this to conclude our paragraph? Thus, housing problems have impact on everyone's in community. Thus, houses are likely to become even more expensive in future. Thus, employment is also a very important issue. I guess so. It was the second would be. You'll find the answer in the next extract. Okay, joining ideas together to vary sentence lengths. High-level writers showed an awareness of style and try to vary the length of their sentences using the mixture of long and shorter sentences makes reading easier and also makes your writing less repetitive. Try reading this paragraph aloud to see how this variety helps. High-level writers show an awareness of style and try to vary the length of their sentences using a mixture of long and shorter sentences makes reading easier and makes your writing less repetitive. Try reading this paragraph aloud to see how this variety helps. I'm also reading aloud from beginning. In many big cities, the population exceeds the number of flats and houses available, which means that many people do not have anywhere to live. This causes several problems. Firstly, it can put pressure on local charities who have to find food and shelter for the homeless. If the government does not step in to help people who are struggling financially, then this puts even more stress on community programs, and causes homelessness to rise even further. In addition, a lack of accommodation means that house prices and rents remain very high. Thus, housing problems have an impact on everyone in the community. I got the wrong answer. So I choose the second one, but the true one is that the actually is that thus housing problems have an impact on everyone's community. You will find the answer in the next extract. Okay, I'll find it. That housing problems have an impact on everyone's in the community. This first sentence on the paragraph makes a claim, and the remaining sentence either explain the effects of this claim or reach conclusion about what these effects tell us. Remember, sorry for the background noise. Remember, the effects can be seen as the supporting evidence or reasoning in this type of argument on your worksheet. Trace the development of the argument in the paragraph by labeling any claims, effects, and points or conclusions. Use symbols like or, plus, etc. to show our ideas are connected. Then compare your answers to my version below. Are there any new symbols you can use? Here are some suggestions. Therefore, thus, this means rises increases goes up, falls decreases go down. Tracing and development of our argument. In many big cities, population exceeds the number of flats or houses available. Many people claim and cause one, effect one, that many people do not have anywhere to live. Point conclusion causes several problems. It can put pressure on local charities. They have to find a shelter from the government. Doesn't help them to take into financially. More stress on community programs can cause homelessness to a lack of accommodation, and house prices and rents remain very high. Housing problems have an impact on everyone on the community. Mm-hmm. As the image above shows, this is a very complex argument. It combines arguing by showing a cause and effect, arguing by showing contrast, and arguing by adding information. Because of this complexity, there is a greater chance of language errors. It is particularly difficult to explain the progress of argument clearly and simply. When planning, you need to be aware of how complex your argument is before you begin writing, so that you can take extra care for when connecting your ideas and when referring back to a much earlier idea. Key idea: if you are in your planning, if you find yourself using a variety of symbols to show how your ideas are connected, this is a good indication that your argument is a complex one. So you need to be very careful to explain it clearly. Language note: we can say that A causes B, or that B is the result of A. Reversing ideas like this is a useful way to avoid repeating the same language and structures. Here are some other variations. Eating too much fast food and a lack of exercise can cause obesity. Obesity can be caused by eating too much fast food and a lack of exercise. Obesity is an often a result of eating too much fast food and a lack of exercise. Eating too much fast food and lack of exercise can result obesity. Eating too much fast food and a lack of exercise can lead to obesity. Obesity can result from eating too much fast food and a lack of exercise. Great, great. So I guess that's the end. Uh-huh. So there is a extra practice. To further practice, to look through any of your previous essay and scan your writing for the following words and if and phrases. If, when, as a result in causes, will, would, could, might. Look carefully at the arguments you made using these words in your position clear. Is your position clear? Does the sentences or verb accurately reflect your how you feel about the result? Think about your the use of conditionals on modal verbs. Make a note of any argument grammar points you need to study and make sure to practice these often. If you have written any essays based on these questions, you to discuss the causes and effects of a problem. Look at the body paragraphs in them and identify any claims you have made and effects that you discussed. How are the ideas in your arguments connected? How did you show this connection? What improvements can you make? I guess this is the next lesson will help. Yeah. So guys, thank you for your attention. This is the end and ciao for now. Bye.